10 years ago, they stood on a brightly lit stage and laughed as security threw me onto the cold pavement. They called me a delusional failure and stripped away everything I loved. Today, I bought their bankrupt tech empire for $80 million just to fire them all. The fluorescent lights of the Grand Ballroom at the Fairmont Hotel in San Francisco hummed with a sterile, unforgiving energy. It was the annual Innovation Summit for Caldwell Tech, a mid-size enterprise software company that had coasted on legacy contracts for far too long. I was 26, a mid-level systems architect, and I was sweating through my only tailored suit. I had spent the last 14 months working nights, weekends, and holidays on a side project that I believed would pivot the entire trajectory of the company. It was a predictive logistics algorithm designed to anticipate supply chain failures before they happen. I called it Sentinel, sitting in the front row were the two men who held my career in their hands. Harrison Caldwell, the CEO and heir to the company his father built, and Gregory Pierce, the aggressively arrogant vice president of engineering. Harrison was a man who wore custom Brioni suits and had a reputation for destroying careers over a lukewarm cup of coffee. Gregory was his loyal attack dog, a man who compensated for his lack of original ideas by stealing credit from junior developers. When my name was called, I walked up to the podium. My mouth was dry, but my presentation was bulletproof. I clicked through the slides showing the data, the neural network architecture, and the projected revenue. For the first 5 minutes, the room of 500 executives, investors, and colleagues was dead silent. I thought I had them. I thought I was changing my life. Then Harrison Caldwell leaned toward his microphone. "Is this a joke?" His voice boomed through the PA system, dripping with aristocratic disdain. I froze, my hand hovering over the presentation remote. "Excuse me, Mr. Caldwell." Harrison let out a sharp, barking laugh. He looked over at Gregory, who was already smirking. "I asked if this is a joke, Caleb, because I am struggling to understand why a low-level back-end coder is standing on my stage, pitching a science fiction fairy tale. Predictive logistics? You think you've built an AI that sees the future out of a cubicle on the 4th floor? The data models are fully functional," I stammered, feeling the heat rise to my cheeks. "If you look at slide 7, I don't care about slide 7. Harrison snapped, his amusement instantly evaporating into rage. He stood up, turning to face the audience. "This is exactly what is wrong with our corporate culture. We have junior employees wasting company time, using company servers, to play tech mogul in their spare time instead of fixing the bugs they are paid to fix." Gregory Pierce took the cue and grabbed his own microphone. "Frankly, Caleb, the code base you submitted for review last week was sloppy. To find out you've been neglecting your actual duties to build this pipe dream. It's not just embarrassing, it's insubordinate." The room erupted into murmurs. Then someone in the third row chuckled. It was a contagious, cruel sound. Within seconds, a ripple of laughter spread through the ballroom. 500 people, my peers, my managers, the people I ate lunch with, were laughing at me. "Get off my stage," Harrison said, his voice dropping to a lethal whisper that somehow echoed perfectly. "In fact, don't even go back to the office. You are terminated, effective immediately. Security will box up your desk." I stood there, paralyzed. I looked out into the sea of faces, desperately searching for a single sympathetic set of eyes. I found Clara. Clara Jenkins was the senior director of HR, but more importantly, she was my girlfriend of 3 years. We lived together. We had looked at engagement rings 2 weeks prior. As my world crumbled on that stage, I locked eyes with her, expecting her to stand up, to say something, to walk out with me. Instead, Clara looked down at her lap, breaking eye contact. She didn't move a muscle. The walk from the stage to the exit felt like 1,000 miles. Two burly security guards escorted me out of the Fairmont, right onto the street, leaving me standing on the pavement in the freezing San Francisco fog. I went home to our shared apartment, my chest tight with a panic attack that refused to subside. I waited for Clara. She didn't come home until past midnight. When she finally walked through the door, she didn't come to comfort me. She walked straight to the bedroom and pulled a suitcase from the closet. "Clara, what are you doing?" I asked, my voice hoarse. "I'm packing, Caleb," she said coldly, not looking at me as she threw dresses into the luggage. "I can't do this." "Can't do what?" "I just got humiliated and fired. I need you right now." She stopped and finally looked at me. Her eyes were devoid of any warmth. "Harrison offered me the VP of Human Resources position tonight at the after-party. Do you know what he told me? He said my association with you was a liability. I have worked too hard to get to the executive level to throw it away because my boyfriend thinks he's the next Steve Jobs. You're leaving me over a job." "I'm leaving you because you are delusional," Clara snapped, zipping the suitcase shut. "You embarrassed yourself today, Caleb, and you embarrassed me. Caldwell Tech is a billion-dollar company. You are unemployed with a useless piece of software. It's over." The door clicked shut behind her. I was 26, jobless, newly single, and entirely alone in a dark apartment. They hadn't just broken my spirit, they had systematically dismantled my entire life in less than 12 hours. I sat on the floor of the living room until the sun came up. I didn't cry. The sadness had entirely burned away, replaced by a cold, hard, crystalline fury. I opened my laptop, looked at the Sentinel source code, and made a silent vow. I was going to ruin them. The next morning I called the only person I trusted, Toby Wyatt. Toby was a brilliant, eccentric database engineer who had quit Caldwell Tech 6 months prior because he couldn't stand Gregory Pierce's micromanagement. Toby lived in a rundown 2-bedroom rental in San Jose. I drove there, pitched him the Sentinel algorithm, and told him what happened. Toby didn't hesitate. "Caldwell is a dinosaur," he said, pushing a stack of empty pizza boxes off his kitchen table to make room for my monitors. "And Gregory Pierce couldn't code his way out of a paper bag. Let's bury them." And for the next 2 years, Toby's living room became the headquarters of our new company, Apex Dynamics. The reality of building a startup from scratch was nothing like the glamorous magazine covers. It was brutal, grinding poverty. I sold my car. I drained my 401k. We lived on instant noodles, cheap coffee, and 4 hours of sleep a night. There were months where I had to choose between paying the server hosting fees and paying my portion of the rent. Our target was Caldwell Tech's primary revenue stream, heavy industrial freight logistics. We rebuilt Sentinel from the ground up, making the algorithm faster, leaner, and infinitely more accurate than anything Caldwell had on the market. But having a great product meant nothing without capital. We pitched to over 40 venture capital firms on Sand Hill Road. 40 times we were rejected. "The market is cornered by legacy players like Caldwell," they said. "You're too small. The risk is too high." We were down to our last $3,000. Defeat was breathing down my neck. But then a twist of fate, or rather, a catastrophic error by our enemies, changed everything. We finally managed to secure a beta test with a mid-sized shipping firm in Seattle. During the deployment phase, Toby noticed an anomaly in our server traffic. Someone was aggressively pinging our backend, trying to clone our data structures. "We're getting hit," Toby said, his fingers flying across the keyboard, tracing the IP packets. "It's a sophisticated scrape. They're trying to reverse engineer the Sentinel routing logic." "Can you block them?" I asked, standing over his shoulder. "Better yet, I can trace them," Toby muttered. A few minutes later, a malicious grin spread across his face. He hit the enter key, pulling up the origin IP address. "You are not going to believe this, Caleb. The IP traces back to a corporate VPN. Caldwell Tech, specifically an admin account belonging to Gregory Pierce." I stared at the screen. Gregory had heard whispers in the industry about Apex Dynamics. He realized that the delusional kid he had fired was building something that actually worked, and instead of innovating, he was trying to steal my life's work. "Don't block them," I said softly, a dark plan forming in my mind. "Let them in." Toby looked at me like I was insane. "Are you kidding? They'll steal the whole algorithm." "No, they won't," I replied. "Create a sandbox environment. Feed them a cloned version of Sentinel, but alter the core routing logic. Make it look identical, but introduce a dormant logic bomb. When they integrate it into their system and run a heavy load, it will cause infinite routing loops. It will crash their entire network." Toby's eyes widened. He nodded slowly, understanding the sheer ruthlessness of the move. For 3 days we let Gregory Pierce gorge himself on our poisoned data. We watched the logs as he downloaded the tampered code, completely unaware that he had just swallowed a digital grenade. Armed with the proof of Caldwell Tech's corporate espionage, I called Richard Gable. Gable was a notorious cutthroat venture capitalist known for loving aggressive, disruptive founders. I didn't pitch him the software. I pitched him the blood and the water. I sat in Gable's immaculate glass-walled office in Palo Alto, sliding a manila folder across his desk. "Caldwell Tech is currently integrating stolen code into their primary servers," I told him. "Code that we designed to fail. In exactly 14 days, their entire logistics network is going to collapse. Their clients will be hemorrhaging millions, desperate for a replacement. Apex Dynamics is that replacement. If you fund us today, we will absorb 30% of Caldwell's market share by the end of the month." Gable opened a folder, reviewed the server logs, and looked up at me. There was no hesitation. "You're a dangerous man, Caleb. I like that. How much do you need to scale the servers to handle their clients?" 15 million, I said without blinking. "Done." 2 weeks later, the trap snapped shut. On a Tuesday morning, Caldwell Tech's primary logistics grid went offline. Gregory Pierce had rushed the stolen code into production without proper auditing, eager to take credit for a new miracle update. The infinite routing loops cascaded through their servers. Trucks were misdirected. Cargo ships missed their port windows, and billions of dollars of freight ground to a dead halt. It was a national industry scandal. Caldwell Tech's stock plummeted by 40% in a single afternoon. Clients were screaming, threatening lawsuits, and right there, perfectly positioned in the chaos, was Apex Dynamics. We offered Caldwell's panicking clients an immediate, seamless transition to our platform. Within a week, we signed contracts worth over $80 million in annual recurring revenue. We didn't just take a slice of their pie, we took the whole bakery. The rise of Apex Dynamics over the next 4 years was astronomical. We went from a cramped living room to a gleaming tower in downtown San Jose. We expanded into global shipping, airline logistics, and military supply chains. Apex reached a valuation of $2 billion. I was on the cover of Forbes. Toby was driving a custom Aston Martin, but I hadn't forgotten the Fairmount Hotel. I hadn't forgotten the laughter, and I certainly hadn't forgotten Harrison Caldwell, Gregory Pierce, or Clara Jenkins. Caldwell Tech was bleeding out, surviving only by liquidating their real estate and firing staff. It was time to finish what they started. It was time to buy them. By year 6, Caldwell Tech was a rotting carcass. The industry had moved on, and without a viable modern logistics platform, they had bled clients until their quarterly earnings reports looked like obituaries. The board of directors had stripped Harrison Caldwell of his autonomy, forcing him to seek a buyer before they had to file for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. I didn't just want to buy Caldwell Tech. I wanted to break the people running it. I wanted to orchestrate a corporate execution so precise that they wouldn't see the blade until it was already through their necks. To do this, anonymity was my ultimate weapon. Harrison Caldwell was a man driven entirely by ego. If he knew Apex Dynamics, the company run by the kid he had humiliated on stage, was the entity attempting the buyout, he would have burned his own company to the ground out of pure spite before selling it to me. We engaged Kirkland & Ellis, one of the most ruthless corporate law firms in the country, to construct a labyrinth of shell companies. The public-facing buyer was a newly minted private equity firm we called Horizon Vanguard Holdings, represented by a stone-cold mergers and acquisitions shark named Arthur Pendleton. Arthur's instructions were incredibly specific, agreed to almost every demand Harrison, Gregory, and Clara made during negotiations, but bury one highly specific gross misconduct clause deep within the 100-page acquisition contract. The negotiations dragged on for 3 grueling months. I sat in a high-tech boardroom miles away, listening to the live audio feeds of the meetings. It was pathetic. Harrison, once a titan of industry who wore custom Brioni and commanded rooms of hundreds, sounded tired, desperate, and incredibly weak. He was begging Arthur Pendleton to allow him to retain his title as CEO. "My family built this company, Arthur." Harrison's voice crackled over the secure audio line. "I am the face of Caldwell Tech. The transition will only be smooth if the market sees me at the helm. Horizon Vanguard agrees to retain you as CEO of the subsidiary division, Mr. Caldwell," Arthur replied smoothly, reading directly from the script I had written for him. "Your leadership is invaluable." Next came Gregory Pierce. The coward was actively trying to throw Harrison under the bus to secure his own future. During a private sidebar meeting with our lawyers, Gregory presented a thick dossier blaming the company's catastrophic software failures entirely on Harrison's budget cuts. He begged for a chief technology officer position under the new ownership, promising he could clean up the mess. We gave him the CTO title on paper. Then there was Clara Jenkins. Hearing her voice over the speakerphone made my blood run cold. She was now the executive vice president of human resources. During the negotiations, she demanded a multi-million-dollar golden parachute and guaranteed stock options in the new parent company. What she didn't know was that a month prior, Apex Dynamics had been featured in a massive Wall Street Journal spread. Clara had finally connected the dots. She realized the multi-billion-dollar tech unicorn destroying her company was founded by her ex-boyfriend. 2 days after the article dropped, my private cell phone buzzed. It was a text from an unsaved number, but I knew exactly who it was. "Caleb, it's Clara. I saw the WSJ piece. I am so incredibly proud of you. I've never stopped thinking about what we had. I made a terrible mistake trusting Harrison. He's a monster. Can we get coffee, just to talk? I miss my best friend." I stared at the glowing screen for a long time. I thought about the night she zipped up her suitcase and left me sitting in the dark, choosing a corporate title over our future. I didn't reply. I just forwarded the screenshot of her text to Arthur Pendleton and told him to push the acquisition through immediately. On a rainy Thursday in November, the final paperwork was signed at the Kirkland & Ellis offices in Chicago. The purchase price for a controlling 80% stake in Caldwell Tech was $80 million, a mere fraction of the billion-dollar valuation they had boasted a decade ago. I sat at my mahogany desk in the Apex Dynamics tower, holding the final, countersigned contract. Toby Wyatt walked in, holding 2 glasses of expensive scotch. He handed me one and grinned. "The wire transfer just cleared," Toby said, clinking his glass against mine. $80 million. You own them, Caleb. Every server, every desk, every patent, It's done. No, I replied, taking a slow sip of the amber liquid. It's not done. Send out a company-wide memo to the Caldwell Tech staff. Tell them the new ownership is holding a mandatory town hall meeting in their main atrium tomorrow at 9 a.m. Tell them the new CEO will be addressing the transition. I set my glass down, adjusting the cuffs of my bespoke suit. It's time to go back to the office. The Caldwell Tech atrium was a cavernous space of glass and steel, heavily populated with nervous employees clutching cups of coffee. The atmosphere was thick with anxiety. Rumors of mass layoffs and restructuring had been swirling for weeks. A temporary stage had been erected at the front of the room. Standing near the podium, looking remarkably smug for people whose company had just been sold for scraps, were Harrison Caldwell, Gregory Pierce, and Clara Jenkins. They believed they had survived the storm. They believed their jobs, their titles, and their exorbitant salaries were protected by the ironclad contracts they had signed with Horizon Vanguard Holdings. At 8:55 a.m., a black Cadillac Escalade pulled up to the front glass doors. I stepped out, flanked by Toby and 4 members of our corporate security team. I wasn't the terrified 26-year-old kid in an ill-fitting suit anymore. I was a 36-year-old billionaire, and I was holding a folder full of pink slips. As I walked through the sliding glass doors and into the atrium, the murmur of the crowd began to die down. People turned to look. A few of the older engineers, people I used to share cubicle walls with, gasped as they recognized me. Harrison was at the podium, tapping the microphone. "If everyone could please gather around," he announced, his booming voice echoing off the glass walls. "Today marks a historic new chapter for Caldwell Tech. We are thrilled to welcome the representatives of our new parent company." Harrison stopped mid-sentence. His eyes locked onto me as I walked down the center aisle, directly toward the stage. The color drained from his face so fast he looked like he was about to pass out. Gregory Pierce squinted, leaning forward. When his brain finally registered who I was, he took a physical step backward, bumping into a promotional banner. Clara stood frozen, her hands covering her mouth, her eyes wide with a mixture of terror and sudden, sickening realization. I didn't stop until I walked up the short set of stairs and onto the stage. I stood right next to Harrison. The silence in the room was absolute. You could hear the hum of the air conditioning. "Hello, Harrison," I said softly, but the microphone picked it up, broadcasting it to the entire company. "You're in my seat." Harrison opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. He looked at Arthur Pendleton, our lawyer, who had just stepped onto the stage behind me. "Arthur, what is this?" Harrison stammered, his aristocratic bravado completely shattered. "Who is Horizon Vanguard?" Horizon Vanguard Holdings is a wholly owned subsidiary of Apex Dynamics, Arthur said loudly, his voice echoing through the room. "And as of yesterday afternoon, Mr. Caleb Thorne is the majority shareholder and absolute owner of Caldwell Tech." The atrium erupted into shocked murmurs. I held up my hand and the room instantly fell dead silent again. I turned to Harrison. 10 years ago, in a room very much like this one, you asked me if my life's work was a joke. I said, my voice steady, carrying the weight of a decade of relentless grinding. You told me I was delusional. You laughed at me, and you made 500 people laugh with you. Then you fired me and told me to get off your stage. Harrison swallowed hard. Sweat beaded on his forehead. "Caleb, listen. We were different people back then. It was business. We can work together now. I'm the CEO of this division." "No, Harrison, you're not," I interrupted, pulling a document from my folder. "Because 10 minutes ago, the board of Apex Dynamics dissolved the Caldwell Tech Executive Suite. You are no longer the CEO. You are an at-will employee. And frankly, I don't like your attitude." I paused, letting the silence hang. "You're fired. Get off my stage." Harrison's jaw dropped. You can't do this. I have an ironclad contract. I have a severance package worth $12 million. Check Section 4, Clause 12 of your buyout agreement, Harrison, I said, a cold smile touching my lips. Severance is voided in the event of gross negligence that damages the company's valuation. Our forensic accountants found that you hid 3 major lawsuits from the board last year. That's fraud. You're leaving here with absolutely nothing. Security will box up your desk. Harrison trembled, his fists clenched, but as 2 of my security guards stepped forward, the fight left his body. The man who had inherited an empire walked off the stage in complete disgrace, stripped of his legacy forever. I turned my attention to Gregory Pierce. He was shaking visibly, holding up his hands in a defensive gesture. Caleb, man, I always knew you were a genius, Gregory babbled desperately. That's why I pushed you so hard back in the day. You were a thief, Gregory, I snapped, my voice cracking like a whip. You tried to steal the Sentinel algorithm. You used a Caldwell corporate VPN to scrape my servers. And you were so utterly incompetent that you downloaded a logic bomb, deployed it to your own network, and caused the catastrophic blackout that destroyed this company's market share. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Gregory had blamed the blackout on a third-party vendor error for years. Now his own team was staring at him in disgust. You aren't just fired, Gregory, I continued, handing Arthur Pendleton a thick file. My legal team is submitting these server logs to the FBI this afternoon. We are pressing federal charges for corporate espionage and digital theft. Enjoy the lawyer's fees. Gregory looked like he was going to vomit. He didn't even argue. He practically ran off the stage, desperate to escape the judging eyes of the engineers he had terrorized for a decade. Finally, I turned to Clara. She was crying now, tears streaming down her perfectly contoured face. She took a step toward me, reaching out a trembling hand. Calla, please, she whispered, her voice pleading. I sent you that text. I missed you. We were going to get married. Please don't do this to me. I had to survive. I looked at the woman I had once loved. I felt absolutely nothing. No anger, no sadness. Just empty closure. You told me that being associated with me was a liability to your career, Clara, I said quietly, though the mic caught every word. You were right, but the liability wasn't my failure. It was your disloyalty. As the head of HR, you willfully ignored Gregory Pierce's toxic behavior and covered up his data theft to protect your own stock options. You are terminated for cause, effective immediately. Goodbye, Clara. She let out a sob, covering her face as a security guard gently but firmly escorted her down the stairs and toward the exit. I stood alone at the podium. I looked out at the sea of remaining employees. They were terrified, waiting for the axe to fall on them. Take a deep breath, I told the crowd, softening my tone. The rot has been cut out. Nobody else is losing their jobs today. In fact, Caldwell Tech is being fully integrated into Apex Dynamics. Every single one of your base salaries is being increased by 20%, effective immediately to match Apex standard pay bands. We are replacing the legacy tech stack, we are upgrading the servers, and we are going to build things that actually matter. The room was quiet for 3 seconds. Then a single engineer in the back started clapping. Slowly, it spread. Within 10 seconds, the entire atrium erupted into deafening, thunderous applause. I handed the microphone to Toby, turned around, and walked off the stage. I didn't look back. The ghost of that humiliated 26-year-old kid was finally put to rest. I walked out of the glass doors and into the San Francisco sunshine, breathing in the air of a brand new empire. Revenge isn't always about shouting in the dark. Sometimes it's about staying perfectly silent while you build an empire big enough to cast a shadow over everyone who doubted you. Success isn't just the best revenge, it's the only one that pays dividends. If this story fueled your drive today, hit that like button, share it with someone hustling in the trenches, and subscribe for more real-life comeback stories.